The message coming out of Philadelphia right now is clear. The Eagles are not treating this offseason like business as usual. After the wildcard loss that ended the Super Bowl title defense, the front office started pulling real levers, and the biggest one so far is on offense. The Eagles are officially searching for their 5th offensive coordinator in 5 seasons, and that alone tells you how seriously they're taking what went wrong in 2025. After moving on from Kevin Patullo, the organization immediately began exploring experienced voices, and one of the most notable names connected to the job is Brian Daboll. According to the report, the Eagles are interviewing Daboll for the offensive coordinator position. This isn't just a random candidate. Daboll has history with Jalen Hurts, going all the way back to Alabama in 2017, when he served as Hurts' offensive coordinator and position coach. That connection matters because this offense still runs through Hurts, and any reset on that side of the ball has to start with maximizing him again. Daboll later became the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills from 2018 to 2021, where he helped build one of the league's most explosive passing attacks, before moving on to be the head coach of the New York Giants from 2022 through 2025. His Giants tenure finished with a 2041 record, but the Eagles are clearly looking beyond the surface numbers and focusing on his offensive background. Daboll has also been an OC for the Cleveland Browns, Miami Dolphins, and Kansas City Chiefs, giving him experience across very different systems and quarterback types. He was named NFL Coach of the Year in 2022 and Assistant Coach of the Year in 2020, which shows the league-wide respect for his offensive mind. Now look at why the Eagles are even here. In 2025, the offense took a real step backward. Philadelphia finished 24th in total offense at just over 311 yards per game. They were 23rd in passing offense, under 195 yards per game, and only 19th in scoring at 22.3 points per game. For a team that built its identity around efficiency and control, those numbers represent a major drop. It was the lowest point offensively in Nick Sirianni's 5-year tenure, and in the playoff loss to the 49ers, the problem showed up again. The Eagles were held to 19 points and only 307 total yards at home, and that game ended the entire title defense run in a flat, frustrating way. Before Patullo, the Eagles cycled through Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, and Kellen Moore. That constant turnover creates instability, but it also shows that the front office isn't afraid to reset if production slips. Bringing in someone like Daboll would be a signal that they want structure, quarterback development, and aggressiveness back in the offense, not just patchwork fixes. While the offense is being reshaped, the defense quietly became one of the most interesting parts of this team down the stretch, and a huge reason for that is the move they made at the trade deadline. The Eagles acquired Jalen Phillips from the Dolphins for a 3rd-round pick in November, and that deal already looks like highway robbery. Phillips didn't ease into the lineup either. His first 2 games in Philadelphia came against 2 of the best tackles in football, Zach Tom from Green Bay and Penei Sewell from Detroit, and Phillips still made an immediate impact. In just those 2 games, he produced 12 pressures and a sack. Phillips has the kind of frame and explosiveness that fits perfectly in Vic Fangio's defense. He can line up as a stand-up rusher, attack from different angles, and overpower tight ends when teams try to chip him. Since joining the Eagles in Week 10, he's tied for 4th in total pressures with 41. He doesn't just flash, he consistently stresses offensive lines. When you combine that with his strength and burst, you start seeing why the front office felt confident, paying only a 3rd-round pick for a player who looks like a long-term difference maker up front.
Then there's Nakobe Dean, and his situation is much more complicated. Injuries have followed him since before he even entered the league. He fell to the 3rd round because of a pectoral strain, barely played as a rookie, then lost much of the 2023 season to a Lisfranc injury. In 2024, he finally started 15 games, but his postseason ended early with a torn patellar tendon that pushed his 2025 start onto the sidelines. He eventually returned to the lineup in the second half of the season, but even then he missed the Week 17 matchup against Buffalo with a hamstring issue. When Dean is healthy, though, the talent is obvious. He's a tenacious run defender with sideline-to-sideline range, real explosiveness, and the ability to rush the passer. He leads all linebackers with at least 30 pass rush snaps in PFF's pass rush win rate at 28.6%. He isn't a liability in coverage, and in today's NFL, That alone separates starters from role players. The big question is not ability, it's durability. Dean is heading toward free agency, and projecting his value is difficult. When healthy, he's comparable to players like Jamien Sherwood and Nick Bolton, who signed 3-year, $45 million deals last offseason. But the injury history will almost certainly affect what kind of contract he can command. So when you step back, you can see the shape of this offseason already forming. The Eagles are aggressively reworking the offense after a statistical and structural decline, exploring experienced leadership like Brian Daboll, while at the same time watching the defense evolve with players like Jalen Phillips emerging and Nakobe Dean sitting at a crossroads between upside and uncertainty. This isn't a quiet reset, it's a calculated one, and every move is tied to fixing what stalled the team when it mattered most. Now I want to hear from you. How do you feel about the Eagles potentially bringing in Brian Daboll and the way the roster is starting to take shape on both sides of the ball? If the Eagles really move forward with a coordinator like Brian Daboll, the ripple effect goes far beyond just play design. It directly touches how Jalen Hurts is used, how the passing game is structured, and how predictable this offense became over the course of the season. One of the biggest frustrations in 2025 was watching Philadelphia struggle to consistently threaten defenses through the air. Finishing 23rd in passing offense is not where a roster with this level of investment is supposed to be. Too often, drives stalled because spacing disappeared, routes took too long to develop, and defenses stopped respecting the intermediate and vertical parts of the field. That's where Daboll's background becomes interesting. When he worked with quarterbacks, his focus was always on simplifying reads without shrinking the offense. At Alabama, he helped Hurts grow as a passer. With Buffalo, he built an attack that allowed the quarterback to be aggressive while still protected structurally. The Eagles aren't just looking for someone to call plays. They're looking for someone who can stabilize an identity that has been changing every single year. 5 offensive coordinators in 5 seasons isn't just a stat, it's a signal of a system that never fully settles. Nick Sirianni knows this offseason is tied to his own future as well. The 2025 numbers weren't just disappointing, they were alarming for a team that was supposed to defend a championship. Being 24th in total offense and under 23 points per game isn't a temporary slump, it's a warning sign. The home playoff loss to San Francisco exposed it in front of everyone. Only 19 points, just over 300 total yards. In a game where execution and adaptability mattered, the Eagles looked one-dimensional and reactive instead of confident and proactive. That's why this coordinator search feels different from previous years. It's not about tweaking, it's about correcting. Whoever runs this offense next will have to rebuild rhythm, timing, and trust between quarterback and system. Hurts can't spend another year adjusting to a brand new philosophy midstream. If Daboll lands the job, the Eagles are betting on experience and quarterback development over experimentation. At the same time, the defense is quietly positioning itself as the stabilizing force of this roster. The Jalen Phillips trade is a perfect example of smart, aggressive management. Giving up only a third-round pick for a pass rusher who immediately produces pressure changes how offenses prepare for Philadelphia. Since week 10, Phillips has been living in the backfield. 41 pressures isn't noise, it's consistency. And the fact that he did it against elite tackles early on shows it wasn't matchup luck. It was talent translating instantly into Fangio's system. What makes Phillips even more valuable is flexibility. He doesn't just rush from one spot. He can stand up, move inside, attack from wide angles, and overwhelm tight ends when teams try to neutralize him. That kind of versatility lets Fangio disguise pressure, rotate fronts, and avoid becoming predictable. When your pass rush forces quarterbacks to rush decisions, everything else on defense becomes easier, from coverage to run fits. And that ties back into Nakobe Dean. Dean's story is one of patience and frustration mixed together. Every time he seems ready to take the next step, something physical interrupts the momentum. But when he's on the field, the difference is obvious. He plays fast, attacks downhill, and doesn't hesitate in space. Leading linebackers in pass rush win rate shows how disruptive he can be when used aggressively. He's not just filling gaps, he's creating problems. The Eagles now face a real decision with him. Dean is talented enough to be part of the core, but availability matters in this league. Front offices don't just pay for production, they pay for reliability. His comparison to Jamien Sherwood and Nick Bolton shows the level of respect his game commands, but his injury history forces a different type of conversation. Do the Eagles commit long-term and trust the body, or do they protect themselves financially while still valuing what he brings when healthy? All of this connects into one bigger picture. The Eagles are trying to rebalance themselves after a season where the margins disappeared. The offense couldn't carry games anymore. The defense had to evolve on the fly, and the front office responded not with silence, but with action. Interviewing a coach like Dable, stealing value with a player like Phillips, and evaluating someone like Dean at a crossroads are all pieces of the same puzzle. Philadelphia isn't rebuilding, but it is recalibrating. They're trying to rediscover what made them dangerous in the first place: quarterback confidence, pass rush dominance, and defensive speed. The moves already happening suggest the organization understands exactly where things slipped and why the margin for error is now smaller than ever in the NFC. If they get the offensive coordinator decision right, maximize Hurts again, and continue building around disruptive defenders like Phillips while making the correct call on Dean, this roster can shift from stalled to threatening very quickly. But the offseason is where that identity gets defined, not in September. Another layer to all of this is how the Eagles' decision-making is becoming more deliberate instead of reactive. In recent years, coordinator changes felt rushed, almost like short-term fixes after disappointment. Now, the approach looks different. Interviewing someone with Dable's resume suggests the front office wants a philosophy, not just a play sheet. They want an offense that can survive bad weeks, adjust in-game, and stop depending on perfect conditions to function. One of the biggest problems in 2025 was how fragile the offense felt. When the first script worked, things looked fine. When defenses adjusted, the Eagles struggled to counter. Drives stalled, third downs became harder, and explosive plays dried up. Being 24th in total offense isn't just about talent, it's about structure. The scheme stopped creating advantages. That's why the coordinator choice now is less about style and more about control. Whoever runs this offense has to give Hurts answers before the snap, not force him to solve everything after it. And that matters because Jalen Hurts is still the centerpiece. The Eagles aren't moving away from him, they're trying to realign the offense around what he does best while expanding what he can access. The problem last season wasn't effort, it was clarity. Too many possessions felt like the quarterback was reacting instead of commanding. A coach like Dable has always emphasized rhythm, timing, and defined reads. If Philadelphia goes that route, the goal is simple: turn the offense back into something that pressures defenses instead of waiting for mistakes. While that work happens on offense, the defense continues to build an identity under Vic Fangio that's based on stress and disruption. Jalen Phillips isn't just a good story, he's a foundational piece. When you trade for a player midseason and he immediately becomes one of your most consistent pressure producers, that changes offseason planning. You're no longer desperate for pass rush, you're refining it. Phillips gives the Eagles someone offenses have to account for on every snap. His production since Week 10 shows that Fangio can move him around, isolate him, and create mismatches without sacrificing structure. And that's huge, because modern defenses survive on unpredictability. When quarterbacks don't know where pressure is coming from, timing breaks down. Phillips isn't just winning one-on-one, he's changing how opponents build protections. That's impact beyond the stat sheet. Then you zoom back to Nakobe Dean, and his situation feels like the emotional core of this roster. Everyone can see the talent, everyone can see the speed, instincts, and aggression, but the injuries keep forcing pauses in his development. When Dean is healthy, he doesn't just fill space, he attacks it. His pass rush efficiency proves the Eagles aren't limited to using him as a traditional linebacker. He's a chess piece, not just a plug-in starter. But the league is unforgiving. Contracts are built on trust as much as performance. Dean's free agency becomes a question of philosophy for the front office. Do you bet on upside and continuity, or do you protect the cap and let the market define his value? The comparison to Sherwood and Bolton shows what Dean could command if durability wasn't an issue. The Eagles now have to decide how much risk they're willing to absorb to keep that kind of playmaking in the middle of their defense. All of these threads point back to one truth: the Eagles are redefining who they are after a season where expectations and results drifted apart. The offense underperformed. The defense had to grow in season. The playoff exit was abrupt and revealing. And instead of pretending everything is fine, the organization is addressing the fault lines directly. This offseason isn't about splashy headlines. It's about alignment. Aligning the quarterback with the scheme. Aligning the pass rush with Fangio's vision. Aligning roster value with availability and production. That's how teams move from disappointment back to dominance without tearing everything down. Philadelphia still has a championship-caliber core. What they're doing now is sharpening it instead of replacing it. The coordinator search, the Phillips trade payoff, and the Dean decision are all part of the same story. Control the details, rebuild trust in the system, and stop letting games slip because the structure isn't strong enough. If the Eagles execute this plan correctly, next season won't feel like a reset. It will feel like a correction. And sometimes, corrections are what turn good teams back into dangerous ones. There's also something else happening beneath the surface with this Eagles offseason, and it's about accountability inside the building. When a team wins a championship, there's always a temptation to assume the formula will keep working. But 2025 showed Philadelphia that success can fade fast if the league catches up to you. The offense didn't just regress statistically, it lost its edge. Defenses stopped fearing it. That's the part that hurts the most when you go back and watch the film. Too many possessions ended without pressure on the opponent. Too many drives depended on perfect execution instead of structural advantages. When you finish 24th in total offense, you're not forcing defenses to adjust to you anymore, you're adjusting to them. And that flips the entire balance of power. That's why this coordinator hire matters so much. It's not